Hi, my name is Vicky Dewsbury and I am the President of the Qvmag Friends, and welcome this morning to Our People, Their Stories, Oral Histories of Northern Tasmania, and this is our November edition, our last one for the year, as it turns out. So a little housekeeping. Obviously exit is the way you came in, out to the rain and the paddock. Toilets, if you haven't been before, are pretty much on the other side of this wall, so you need to go around past the front desk and they'll sort of be over in that corner. Okay, I'd like to take this opportunity to acknowledge that we meet today on the unceded lands of Lutruwita, home to the Lutumarina, Taranatapana and Pananina peoples. We acknowledge their ancestors and future leaders as custodians of country, its natural resources and keepers of a rich oral, design and creative culture. Now, many of you will be here today as friends and fans of our speaker, Archana Brammall, not just as followers of her hospitality and business successes in northern Tasmania. If you had read our short profile, you would know she comes with an impressive list of achievements. I will name a few: in languages, economics, literature, project management, tourism, and is on various boards of the Migrant Resource Centre, Care for Africa, and Football Tasmania. And Vice Chair of Launceston Soccer, the round ball, the beautiful game, we get it, and Launceston Chamber of Commerce, and more. That's just a start. I'm sure her talk today, titled "Sometimes All It Takes Is Hope," is but the first chapter in her illustrious life story so far. Please welcome Archana Brammall. Thank you.
I am nervous. One late Saturday afternoon in June, a little girl was born in Ethiopia, on the outskirts of the capital city Addis Ababa, in a small town called Ambo. Not long after being born, the baby and her family did move to Addis, but at the young age of 6 months, she was diagnosed with a twisted and blocked intestine. It was serious. It was operated upon, stitched back up, and doctors were hoping that it was all successful and finished and nothing to worry about. As it happened, it did not heal. The baby's tummy swelled, it got very infected. Nobody knew what was going on and what had actually happened. And pretty much in those days, technology not being what it is today, diagnosis was not easy. There was talk of the baby not making it. The baby's mother and parents were notified that hope was minimal, that they needed to prepare, that the baby's chances of survival was slim. And so the baby's mother, in her dire moments, went to church before going off to possibly looking for a coffin and yelled out to God, "Why me? Why this situation? Why my baby? You gave her to me, and now you're taking her away from me so soon." And whilst in despair, she was called back to the hospital because doctors decided that they possibly needed to open up the stitches again and have a look, as the scar it was operated on was passing and they needed to go back in and have another look. They opened up. What was actually found was gauze and small surgical scissors had been left inside, causing an incredible infection. Those were taken out. A massive scar was left on the baby that later on in life continued to be a massive scar on her tummy that looks like a huge scorpion. But to her mother and to her father, prayers had been answered. The baby survived. Not long after that, the doctor who had operated was clearly mentally challenged to a great extent, that lots of things had happened, and sadly ended up jumping off a tall building, ending his own life. That there, ladies and gentlemen, is me. My name is Archana Brammall. I was born June 21, 1978, and my story had almost ended before it had begun. I'm so grateful to be here, and I find myself so emotional, I'm not sure why. I'm grateful to have been invited to speak today. I was nervous about what it is I could talk about, what in this world and what I could say to make sure that you were engaged and interested and didn't regret these next 40 minutes of your life that you were never going to get back. I wrote that, and then I decided I couldn't write anymore. It was really hard to try and summarize my 46 years in 40 minutes. So I decided I would write that little bit, and then I have another little bit that I'll read out, but I'll talk to you instead. Having been born in Ethiopia, I was born to an Indian father and a wonderful Ethiopian mother. One was Christian Orthodox, one was Hindu, one was 30 years older than the other. And it wouldn't matter sometimes to some people who felt that those kind of relationships do exist and can survive successfully. But it was challenging when one of those parents was only 16, turning 17 when they had me. She being my mother and my greatest inspiration and my idea behind hope. And why hope is so important in people's lives. What hope can do for communities, for businesses like the ones I run, for friendships, for partners, for our kids. Hope sometimes is all it takes. We lived a rather privileged life. My father was a wonderful lecturer of English literature. He studied in England, taught in England, taught around the world, taught in Italy. He was one of those wonderful, engaging lecturers. And he could hold the attention of a few hundred people in the room in how eloquently he spoke. What I found really hard was that this man who was so worldly, this man who I loved incredibly, was so unworldly when it came to how he dealt with his wife at home. He was quite a domineering father. And my notion of having a voice today really came out of being able to see how my mother was able to survive at a time when she was not able to speak. To give you a couple of, to paint a bit of a picture, we had a beautiful house in Ethiopia. And in those days, a beautiful house also meant that it came with 7-foot-high Besser-built walls around you. So you couldn't really see outside. You had a house inside, but if you wanted to go out, you had a big gate that you got out of, and that's how you then stepped into the rest of the world. For my mother, she could only go out once every 6 months or so. That's what she was allowed to do. So for her, hope, ladies and gentlemen, was her idea of when he would go to work, when he would go to teach, we had on that gate a little keyhole. Through that keyhole, my aunt, who was also living with me, was how she would see the world go by. And that was her scope of the breadth and width of what hope, what life, what a future could look like. That was the vision she had. But never one day did she feel that she could never reach these dreams that she had. They were limited in her view. They were limited in where she could go. They were limited in how she could speak. And she had stopped school because she had given birth to me. A few years later, at the age of 22, she was pregnant with my sister. And she had interrupted her education on and off, trying to get to school, trying to sit for exams. And part of the challenge there was my father wanted her to actually finish school, to get an education, but he didn't want her to go to school. He just wanted her to sit the exams for fear that she'd find another life should she step out. So, grade 12, she took her first exam, pregnant with my sister, and she came back and she failed. She went back a second time, the following year, took the exam, came back and failed. She went back again, a third time, came back and failed. Ladies and gentlemen, she went again, a fourth time. And guess what? She came back and she failed. She went for the fifth time. She took the exam, and this time she passed. Age 27, never giving up, she did it. She did it because she felt she could. She did it because she didn't want to give up. She did it because she felt she needed it to do it for her kids. If ever there was a time to feel that you couldn't do something, and a moment to give up and not have hope, I thought maybe that was one of those times. I had a privileged education. I went to a British school in Ethiopia. Kids from all over the world, teachers mostly from Britain. It was wonderful. It was my escape. It was quite ironical that on the one hand, I had this amazing education. I was encouraged to become a good student. And behind it all was this almost unspoken purpose that if you are educated, you can be somebody. And hopefully, in the eyes of my father, I was going to be prime minister or doctor or lawyer or somebody great, but certainly not a businesswoman. That was not great. And I suppose in those days, if I didn't actually get an A B+ was never good enough. And so if you don't get encouragement and if you don't get acknowledged for the hard work that you're doing, you slowly slip away thinking, what's the point? Why am I doing this? But my friends were great, and there was a lot of encouragement around. One day, grade 6, I turned up at school in the morning, as I normally do, and I had just heard, because we were in a communist country at the time, a dictatorship, that a fair few of the parents or fathers of my friends had been gunned down that morning. So again, please imagine, here we are, the complexities of my life at home, the complexities of being in an international school where you had an opportunity of hope and growth and what you could possibly be, and then the constraints of a country that had a dictatorship, that if you did speak, and if you went against the grain, that you would be eventually killed. So I don't know what this brain ended up actually taking in, but I did know that from a young age of 7, that all those things combined, I wanted something different, somewhere else, somewhere where perhaps that sense of hope could flourish. The one place my father could never catch me and get angry with me was the toilet. So I spent a lot of time on the toilet, in the toilet, not on the toilet. Thankfully, in our toilet, there was a map of the world. And on that map, and if you've looked at it carefully, Australia is always the bright red or bright orange continent. It had colour of hope and colour of something invigorating. And I always pointed at it. And I thought at that young age that one day, I don't care how, that's where I'm going to go and no one's going to catch me. I said that. I did not know how I was going to achieve it, but I dreamt it. I can't possibly put all my 46 years into 40 minutes, so I'm going to quickly fast forward. That in 1992, again, in that dictatorship, there was a coup. The opposing party wanted to overthrow the government, as happens a lot in African and developing nations. That comes with a lot of crisis, a lot of pain, a lot of fear, and not knowing what the next day might bring. I had gone to a swimming lesson with one of my best friends, and as I was doing laps, we could hear the helicopters circling. Soon we heard the biggest loud bang that I have ever heard in my life. We just discovered the palace next to us had been bombed. A coup was definitely happening. We got home, and at that point in time, and like I said, I'm part Indian, part Ethiopian, And everybody else who was there as an expatriate had all its countries actually pull out all its nationalities, and all the people that belonged to different countries, they were pulled out very quickly. Within 24 hours, the country had no foreigners in it. The Indians were very slow. We didn't get out. We stayed. And when we stayed, it meant that we were going to have to see this through. The rebels had come in. I remember counting, they're 30 kilometres away, they're 10 kilometres away, they're 5 kilometres away, and then bang, there they were. We spent a week under a bed in a small room that was provided to us by the university in a dungeon style, as missiles and rockets were being launched all around us. That again was my time where I yelled out to a faith that I believed at the time was, God, why us? Why again? Why are we in this situation? We're going to die. The funny thing in that whole story is my father loved draft beer. He loved drinking. And though he was locked up in that little room with all of us, he was desperate for a beer one day. We couldn't understand, and I still don't understand. And he knew that if he walked 100 meters in a certain direction, there was a little home pub-style home brewing place that he could get to, and he could beg them for some beer. I couldn't believe it. There was curfew. It was a 24-hour curfew. It was pretty simple. There was nobody on the streets. You had people with machine guns who were 14 years old who couldn't speak the language. English was a no-no. Amharic, which is the local language, they didn't speak because they had come from another region. But they had the AK-47 Kalashnikov ready to go any moment. And he chose to go and get his beer, walk across the road. What happened? They caught him. And they pinned him up against the wall, ready to shoot. And someone said, let him go, he's a teacher. They dropped him, and instead of turning back to come home, he continued to go, get his beer, and come back. And that to him was peaceful. To us, that was hell. We had almost experienced this notion of seeing that my father was going to die. All these moments of close moments. Life, possibility of death. Life, possibility of death. Survival, non-survival. That feeling always existed. Grade 10, he decided that he had enough of me playing around with boys. I loved soccer, football, round ball. And I used to spend a lot of time with the boys. And to him, that was a complete no-no. So before I knew it, he said I was going to go to a boarding school in the Indian Himalayas at 3,000 meters. I didn't have any time to say goodbye to my friends. It was one day I was told, the next day I was on a plane, my mother stayed back, my sister stayed back, and off we went. What he didn't realize was while that was seemingly a punishment, that was the first step to my freedom and to my opportunities. It was the best 3 years of my life. I loved it. My first day, however, at orientation, very scared, the idea of living somewhere new, the idea that I'd left my mother at home, my sister at home. I did not know whether I would fit in. I met a wonderful friend of mine who to this day continues to be one of my dearest friends. We had orientation, and when I describe it to you, I don't know if I can actually do it full justice, but we had dorms across the mountain, so we were on a big mountain, I said 3,000 meters, and sometimes when you get from point A to point B, you're actually only walking on a track this wide. A lot of silver oak and a lot of leaves on the ground, and it was evening. And we were all walking back from one side of the dorm to another along this track. Everyone ahead of me had gone past. I saw a little bit, like a dent in the track, and I thought, I won't step there, I'll step over it. And as I stepped over it, I slipped. When you go home later, please look up what the Indian Himalaya mountains look like, if you don't know already, but they're very steep. and I rolled down and down and down. That was my first night at boarding school. That was my first moment, again, of my life flashing before me. And I did not know what was going to happen, but surely what felt eternal was only a few seconds, really. And I was very fortunate enough to have been lodged between a tree and the side of the mountain. And there I was, safe, one more time. I had a few friends who were behind me who saw that happen, and luckily they knew how to abseil, rock climb, whatever it took. And an hour or so later, they were able to bring me back up. And again, a touch with death, a touch with life. For me, I guess what was happening in these points in my life was that you had an option of feeling fear, where fear can paralyze you, or you had the touch of fear, where you feel stronger each time because you have survived something unique. And I felt I was getting stronger. And it was quite liberating to think that, though scary at the same time. I finished high school. I didn't want to go to Delhi University. I still wanted to come to Australia. Australia fees, even in those days, was $12,000 a year. Impossible, something that I could not even think of. $100 was hard to come by, let alone $12,000 a year. And so I kept dreaming. I didn't want to go to Delhi University. My father was upset with me at that point in time. He felt that I hadn't done well enough, so his punishment to me was not really directed at me, it was directed at my sister. My sister was not allowed to go to the same school that I went to because it was too expensive, and I had dashed her chances of being able to continue going there. So she went to a school that was probably more detrimental to her than it was helpful in any possible way. So that guilt within me made me strive even more, but I did not know what that striving and where it was going to go. I still had all this hope. And in a long story short, in the year 2000, a couple of friends got together and they said, "You've always been dreaming of going to Australia. We've bought you a ticket. Off you go." I didn't tell my father until 10 days before I was going to go because I knew he was the sort of man that was going to do anything to stop me. But the person who I had the greatest backing from was my mother. And she said, "Go. You've got this chance. Go." Now, she used to do all the washing all the time. And my father used to always forget the coins that he had in his pockets. And for a long time, she had squirreled away those notes and pocket coins. And when she sent me off that day, she gave me $100 in my hand. That was all I had. I got a visa. I arrived at Melbourne Airport, July 2000. I landed. And I thought, what the fuck am I going to do now? I am here. What now? The 3 years before, between high school and actually getting there, I ended up getting a degree in economics and English literature, and I did it by correspondence, and that was really hard. I went and sat for my exams just like my mother did. I did it from home. I chose to study at home, and then I went and I studied and I sat my exams, and luckily I got through. Arriving at Melbourne, again, I can't describe everything that happened, but I had made friends in India who I knew were in Australia. And they had allowed me to stay on their floor, but I felt that I had nothing to contribute, no money, no skills, nothing. I could speak English, and because I could speak English, everyone thought I knew everything. I did not know anything. How to catch a tram? I've never seen a tram. You know, walking anywhere, what to say, how to step into a room. Cheese, I had never eaten cheese before. You know, simple things. Holding fork and knife. Simple things that you take for granted, that simply because you speak English, people think that you know how to do these things. I did not know. It was scary. Walking even on the right side of the road, and I turned around. I happened to turn around while some people were arguing behind me, and I wanted to look because in India and in Ethiopia you look. In fact, you stare. So I turned around and I looked, and someone said to me, "What the fuck are you looking at?" I thought, oh my God, where have I turned up? Where am I and why am I here? But it was the start of a journey. As it happened, with those $100, I would get up very early in the morning, walk the streets of Brunswick Street. I had at that time met my dear husband, Tim, but we were just friends. I never thought that I would end up with a skinny white redhead. He was not part of the dream. But I did walk those streets early in the morning. I'd do the dishes and not try and be a burden. I'd come back late at night because I did not know what else I could do. I had a 3-month visa, but I did not know what to do next. McDonald's at that time, and I don't know if you know Flinders Street Station well, but along Flinders Street Station, it's no more there, but there was a McDonald's right there. And if I timed it well, say at about 2 o'clock, I could have 1 meal a day for $2. You could have your burger, your fries, and your drink. I'd never had McDonald's before. My body suffered, but my budget kept going. And not long after that, another old school friend of mine said that I could stay at their house in Hawthorne if I wanted. And so because I didn't want to be a burden over here, I said, yes, I'll come over and I'll stay there because he was going traveling. Their house had a little granny flat. I thought, all right, I'll go, I'll stay, and I'll find my way. This is where and this is probably a month in. I'm about to read you something that I probably can't talk about, but I did write. One evening, late afternoon, I found myself at the McDonald's New Flinders Street Station yet again. Sitting there with my usual mixture of staring at people going by, lost in thought, and eating my burger slowly, I saw a group of Ethiopians walk towards where I was. I was so excited. That sense of somebody, familiarity, hope of something to come out of it, a feeling of connection, a piece of home. I didn't realize that all these people had already lived here for as long as they have, and they certainly weren't as excited as I was to see another Ethiopian, which was a little bit of a reality check for me. Nonetheless, the usual gestures of nodding with a smile, a nod of mutual acknowledgement proceeded, with them stopping by to say a proper hello. Probably because they could read from my face that I was incredibly keen to have a conversation. As they walked over with greetings in Amharic, I quickly made room around my table. They made me feel wonderful. Or should I say, I found myself feeling happy. I felt great. I felt I found my people. This is so nice. I had now some friends. To my great pleasure, they said to me, let's go and cook traditional Ethiopian food. We will go and have dinner together. I said, wonderful. And so we caught tram number 75 from Flinders Station along Bridge Road towards Richmond to one of the Housing Commission houses along there. Got into the building, up the lift to level 12 or 13, I can't quite remember, into a sparse-looking apartment. We went in, turned on some music, cooked a bit of food, but nothing like I was expecting, and I remember that again I needed to keep my expectations in check. However, the people seemed so lovely. It got to about 8:30, then suddenly one person said, oh, I've just got to go out. I'll be back in a second. Next person said, I'll be back too. And before I knew it, everybody had gone, but the meals had barely been touched. We had really only finished cooking. I waited for a little while, and I was with the person whose apartment it was, and he assured me that they were coming back soon. Oh, they're coming, don't worry. I sat for a little bit, and then when I thought no one was coming back, and it felt a bit strange, food not really touched, the guy himself made himself busy and made it seem like we would eat when the others got back, I said I had better go too. It's time to go. I was approaching the door and thanking him as I was walking towards the door, and sure enough, he got in front of the door and told me I was going nowhere. Something changed. His face changed. His voice changed. The whole thing changed. I did not know what to think. Again, my life flashed before me. And I didn't understand what was going on, but I could feel my heart beating. I could feel fear. I could see my mother's face. And I was so scared of my father. All these feelings that you don't necessarily know how to control, of what's going to come into your thinking. I realized what was happening. I cried and I said, "Please let me go." And he said, "No." And so that was the moment in time where I was forced to lay down with his hands over my mouth with a knife at my neck and got raped multiple times that night. I suppose I don't know how to explain it, other than I feel very fortunate and lucky that I am so strong today. I don't feel any less than anyone. I don't feel dirty. I am not angry with myself. I don't feel regret that I did what I did, because I knew that I did it out of kindness and wanting to make friends. And my intentions were genuine, young and perhaps naive. I suppose I learned. What did I learn? I don't know. But you learn that you never know what might come your way. I learned that you can be careful, but you still don't have control of what might come your way sometimes. And it doesn't make you a bad person. It doesn't make you guilty. In my culture, especially in those days, and though things are changing now, people still often point the finger at the female and say, well, if she didn't find herself there, if she wasn't the person wearing what she did, or if she had thought better, it's all about she should not have. She. But the truth is, I was powerless, and I didn't deserve what happened to me that night. I remember laying there after what seemed like hours of torture, waiting stiff but calm but in shock, tears silently streaming down my face because he didn't want the neighbors to know anything. And if I opened my mouth, he did have his knife quite ready. And at about 3 a.m, he fell asleep, into deep sleep, and I knew that was my moment. I knew that it was a risk, but I knew I was going to take that risk, so I slowly got up. Once I opened the door, I knew no one would catch me again. And I remember getting down, running down those stairs, 12 floors or so. There was no way I was going to go into a confined lift. I was too scared for that. I ran down Bridge Road, just cold and felt alone, and I questioned again, why was I here? What reasons do I have to be here? What had I done, and why me? But I got to Flinders Station about 4 a.m. I sat on the steps, watched as the few people went by, some sleeping not far away from me, but it felt like the safest public place I knew, and there I waited for the sun to rise again, hopeful that today would be better than yesterday. I guess the reason why I told you that story is because you really never know the different layers, the different challenges, the different feelings people have in their daily lives. I run successful businesses, but I run them on the back of my life and my experiences. I run them because I am passionate, because I care, and because good people have come into my life, like my husband, of 24 years. He was kind to me, he was thoughtful, but one of the things he said to me very early on when we didn't do a traditional "would you marry me," we were actually outside hanging clothes, and he said, "What do you think? Do you think we should get married?" And I said, "Yeah, why not?" And he said, "When do you think?" And I said, "In about a month." He said, "Okay." We did. I didn't have my parents with me at the time, but I told them. And I was relieved because I made the choices for myself. I had chosen the person who was going to be in this life with me, for who I wanted and understood who I was. But one day, I'd walked into the house and the light bulb had fused. I walked out. I came back the next day, done our jobs, come back, and that light bulb was still fused. And I said to him, Tim, the globe hasn't been changed. And he said to me, yeah. And I said, well, aren't you going to change it? And he said to me, why me? Why not you? And I thought, oh my God, please don't say that to my people back home. They will think you're weak. And I said, but I think that's your job. You're the male of the house. That's what I have known it to be. The domineering person in my life does these particular jobs, and this is how I've known it to be. And he said to me, do you really want to play that game for the rest of your life? Shall we really divide what's yours and what's mine, what you can do and what I can't do? And at that point in time, I thought, shit. And today, I feel privileged to be the wife of Tim Brammall, to have had the strength and backbone to tell my story. I wouldn't normally have done that. Lots has happened. This is a very abridged version of my life. So much more has happened. But today, I feel strong enough to be the employer of migrants from 13 different nationalities speaking 15 languages between our 3 businesses across Launceston and Campbelltown. I don't do that because I want some accolade for it. I do it because I know that simply because either you speak English or you don't speak English, it doesn't make you anything. It doesn't define you in any way. You have the capacity to give, to care, to work hard. Simply because you don't speak English, it doesn't mean you can't do maths. Simply because you don't speak great English, it doesn't mean that you can't be a great person to welcome people into a cafe and make them feel at home and cared for. Simply because you don't speak English, it doesn't mean anything other than there is a small barrier between you and I that we can overcome if our hearts are willing to overcome those. We shouldn't judge people. We shouldn't put our own thoughts of what life should look like for somebody else and put that upon somebody else. Allow that person to tell their story. Give them an opportunity to speak. Make them feel welcome. Include them in your lives. And allow a moment to ask your neighbor, your community, your friend, a passerby, how are you? You never know what answer you're going to get. Tasmania is now my home, one of 3 homes. I am so fortunate to have wonderful kids. Between Tim and I, we span 4 continents. He's half English, half Australian. I'm half Indian, half Ethiopian. And what a privilege it is to be a family of the globe. What a privilege it is to be able to bring those experiences and share them here in Tasmania, that people have now welcomed me as one of them. I'm so grateful that you're here on a rainy day. It made me so nervous to know that I knew so many of you, and I've only known you because you've been kind enough to be patrons of what I have created. And the reason why I've created what I've created is because it's a place of comfort, a place of safety, a place you can come and feel welcome and loved. That's all. Oh, I followed the skinny white man. I was in Melbourne at that time, and we had obviously been friends, and we decided that, yes, maybe a relationship is something we could look at, but the fear of all of that, and again, the fear of not being able to report essentially a rape, was not knowing what my visa status or what immigration would look like for people like me. And so I was also a very determined woman way back then, and I did say to him, I was not going to marry you for a visa, so more than happy for us to have this friendship. But it's not, I don't want anything from you, but it might not last. And time went by, and we discovered that we actually did really enjoy each other's company, and we did want to be together. But still, I didn't want to get married at that time. And I had to have a way to stay longer to be with him as well. So it was kind of a bit of a problem. So he said to me, listen, I've got some money. Tell immigration you've got some money and just extend it, and let's see what life brings us. And so please don't judge, but those times were the times of traveller's checks. And so you could take your cash to the bank and say, this is mine, please turn it into traveller's checks, and they put the name at the bottom of the traveller's checks. So I went up to 13th floor of Collins Street in the immigration office, and she was there, and I could feel the sweat down my back as she asked me, do you have enough money? And I said, yes, can you see? I've got all this available to me. And she said, how long do you want to stay? I said, another 6 months if possible. And she said, that's fine. And she gave me the stamp. I ran down the stairs again. And as it happened, there's an ANZ bank right next door. I went back in there, cashed the money back. So these are my traveller's checks. I'd like cash, please. Got the cash. And then went back to Tim and said, thanks very much. I don't want your money, but I can stay for another 6 months. Good luck to you and good luck to me. Let's see what happens. And he was a librarian at that time. And he was sick of libraries and the politics that went behind that. And he decided to quit his job in probably December, and his sister was running a kayaking business on the East Coast in Coles Bay. And so he decided to come down in in December. And I said, well, I'll come and visit you. I am not going to come and visit you during Christmas. I don't need to meet your family. This is probably not long term. But I will come down for 3 weeks and check out Tasmania. And so there we were. I came down. 3 weeks has turned to 24 years. Yeah.
Coming back for Christmas.
Yeah, you were only coming back for Christmas too. Yeah.
Anyone else? Archana, you create beautiful business of nourishment, beautiful food, wonderful place for people to be nourished. How come you haven't managed to fatten him up?
Sadly, his mother always asks me that stupid question. Every time she looks at him, and I haven't invited her to here today. No, I do love my mother-in-law. I don't know, he's been 63 kilos all his life, and he remains that, so that's that. There was one bit of my story that I didn't tell you, that I needed to work in Melbourne, and this is the inspiration behind actually why I started Sweetbrew in Tatler Lane, or even the notion of business. I needed a job. A friend said to me there was a job going in Ascot Vale in an Ethiopian cafe. Again, another Ethiopian cafe. Now, I love my people, don't get me wrong. You get bad people, you get people that are not aligned with you and your thoughts everywhere in the world. So this is not stereotyping anything. This is just my one experience. And I went to the owner, and he said to me, there is a job. I said, okay. He said, $8 an hour. I said, that's fine. He said, 7 days a week. I said, okay. He said, 17 hours a day. I said, okay. And so I did my job. I was tired. And this is, again, where Tim was, to me, a wonderful human, not necessarily a partner, but a human. He would take me at 9 in the morning, drop me on his way to work, and then he'd come back at 2 in the morning and wait there in the cafe for me until 3 in the morning till I finished. And one particular day, a gentleman who used to drink a lot, and I really do not like alcohol very much for many reasons, this gentleman would come in and sit and drink every day. His liver was gone, but they wanted his money, so nobody ever imposed their responsible serving of alcohol on this poor man that just kept drinking. One day he needed to get to the toilet, and the toilet was probably from here to the door. He couldn't make it. And so he had soiled his pants, floor, everywhere. And for my $8 an hour, the guy said to me, the owner, clean him and clean it. And I did. But you know, he was my greatest inspiration of starting what I have. Because I remember looking at him and going, you idiot. I never want to be like you in my life. And one day I will employ people. And when I do employ people, it will be because we're equals in some way. And I would never treat people like that in my life. So he was my greatest inspiration in a kind of ironic way. Lots of things. All these people, all these experiences have been my inspiration, really. And most of them not so great. Any other questions? Yes.
Can I ask one more?
Yeah. Yes. I made it my life mission when I came to Australia that because my sister didn't get the education she did, and again, Tim, my greatest hero in life, who had not met my parents, my sister at all, I said to him, I need to make sure she goes to the school that I went to. And so at 21, I ended up taking out a $100,000 loan to make sure that my sister went to the school that I went to, and then managed to get her to come and study at University of Tasmania in Hobart. And today she's lead project manager at Victoria University in Melbourne. My mother, I invited to come and visit me once, a long time ago, the first time I actually asked her to come. And she said to me, I rang and I said, I'd like you to come and visit me. And she said, you are so rude. I can't even go to town on my own and you're asking me to come all the way to Australia? Have you lost your mind? And so then she hung up. So then I dialed and I picked up the phone again and I said, listen, I am serious. She said, you can be as serious as you like. She hung up. I'm not coming. So then I thought about it, we thought about it, and we bought her ticket. I just bought the ticket. And I said to her, you're coming. And I knew she was angry, but she was hopeful. And I said to her, you can do this. You can do it. There will be people on the way who will help you. You can do this. And so 2014, she managed, long story, and Launceston Airport. We were waiting, and in my true mother style, she was the last to get off, and I kept waiting and waiting to look to see if this woman was even on this plane. And there she was. She came down, and she came down the stairs, and I'm sure nobody at Launceston Airport has seen this before or may not see it again, but she got down to the bottom, she got down on her knees and kissed the ground. And she said, I made it. She landed back here in Australia today at 10:15. So I'm looking forward to seeing her over the weekend. Yeah. Yes, Lisa, sorry, I know.
Sorry, did your mum live in the Himalayas or in Ethiopia?
She lost her home in the Himalayas, and but she's been in Ethiopia for the last few years, and so my wish for her is to now live with us here in Australia. Quite a long process, but she's arrived today, and so let's see where that takes us. Yes. Yes.
And I can't believe it. So in 2014, when I first knew her, she was like...
She had just arrived.
She seemed like she'd been here forever.
Yeah, she's that woman. She's that person.
She was with you decades.
No.
Wow, she's brilliant.
Okay.
Great. Thank you. Now, this is
Thank you.
Membership.
Oh.
There you go. I don't know, you're a very busy lady.
Oh, no, I will. I will.
So thanks, Archana.
Thank you.
Thank you. Your amazing story about the will to survive and flourish and the power of not giving up, and how hope can transform lives. I think you can agree she has delivered a hope-filled and uplifting finish to a fabulous year of speakers. So thank you again.